In 2022, we celebrate 130 years of HBCU football. On December 27th, 1892, Livingstone and Biddle College, now known as Johnson C. Smith University, played in Salisbury, North Carolina, with Biddle winning 5-0. Over time, HBCU football has evolved. HBCU football's popularity continues to rise. Millions attend games each year and millions more watch on television. The HBCU bands provide some of the top entertainment in the country. Over that time, some of the best players to ever play in the National Football League played at HBCUs. Every Monday through Friday on the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, national radio and television host Donal Ware takes a look at what's happening in HBCU football and talks with coaches, players, administrators, and media about the 2022 season. Make sure you join the conversation on social media by using the hashtag HBCU130. Now, here's your host, Donal Ware.
This is the HBCU Football Daily Podcast for today, Monday, October 24th. I'm Donal Ware. Manic Monday here on the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. And there is a reason for that because we have just completed week 8. You have a lot of teams that have put themselves in position for division championships, setting up conference championships. And it was a really good weekend for some, not so good for others. So we're going to get to that right now. In non-conference action, number 1, Jackson State defeated Campbell 22-14. This was one of the more highly anticipated non-conference games because Campbell has a pretty good squad. But, I mean, it was Jackson State was pretty much dominated the game. I think if you look at the score, you would say it was a close game. I mean, it wasn't a blowout like we've seen Jackson State doing to other opponents, but Campbell scored a touchdown late to pull to within 1 score. Bethune-Cookman got its second win of the season, defeated Mississippi Valley State 45-35. The struggles continue for the Delta Devils. They able to get some points this time around, but not able to stop Bethune-Cookman, who put up 45 points. Southern defeated Virginia University of Lynchburg 51-7, sets up a really good matchup next week against Jackson State. That's going to be a big-time football game. Prairie View A&M, after a bye week, gets a non-conference win, 54-21 over Lamar. That's a good non-conference win for Prairie View A&M, who is still in position for the SWAC's Western Division crown. As we go through these scores, you'll see why. Speaking of going through the scores, the next game up, Texas Southern defeated Alcorn State 34-27. I had some, last week talked a little bit about the fact that Texas Southern still sort of in the mix because of its win against Southern, right? So it has the head-to-head advantage. And even though Texas Southern right now has 2 losses, but anything could happen. Southern could get another loss. If so, that means Texas Southern would own the head-to-head against Southern. Alcorn State is slipping in terms of its standings in the Western Division. Now 2-3 in conference play. You got Southern that's right there. You've got Prairie View A&M right there. And then Texas Southern, not only with 1 less loss than Alcorn State, but has the head-to-head advantage. That's a tough loss if you're Alcorn State. In what was the HBCU national game of the week, another wrong prediction for me. I say another. I've been right on some, but not on this one. South Carolina State holds on, defeats North Carolina Central 26-24 in Orangeburg, South Carolina. So now North Carolina Central has 1 loss in the conference. But not only that, I look at South Carolina State, and South Carolina State may be poised to make a similar run as it did last year. Remember, the Bulldogs, the season that the Bulldogs are having now prior to conference play is similar to the season it was having last year. Then it went on a roll, went undefeated in MEAC play, ultimately went on to win the HBCU National Championship. In a surprise, Howard, homecoming in Washington, defeated Delaware State 35-17. If you're Delaware State, that is not a football game you can lose. I mean, I think for Howard's now 1-0 in conference play. Delaware State 1-1. I thought that no losses may win. It still could be if South Carolina State gets the job done, because everybody has at least one loss except for South Carolina State at this point. Still a lot of season left to play. But if you're Delaware State coming off a win last week against Norfolk State, that's just not a game. I mean, you just cannot lose that game to Howard, and it wasn't even close. Morgan State on the road, falling to Delaware 38-7 in non-conference play. In a Big South matchup, North Carolina A&T defeated Robert Morris 38-14. The Aggies now have won 4 straight games, one of the hotter teams in HBCU football, and now 2-0 in the Big South, setting up the matchup at the greatest homecoming on earth in Greensboro next weekend against the aforementioned Campbell Camels. It was Hampton falling to Richmond 41-10. Don't look now, but Tennessee State has won 3 straight games, including 37-14 over Eastern Illinois. More importantly, not only does Tennessee State even its record at 4-4, it is now 2-0 in the OVC. Allen gets its first victory of the season, 50-14 over Bluefield State. Allen had been putting up a lot of points, and it showed against the Big Blue. It was Shawan over Bowie State 21-15. So Shawan keeps its hopes alive in the CIAA's Northern Division. Meanwhile, I think it's almost a wrap now for Bowie State, who now has 3 losses in the division, not in the division, but in the CIAA. Edward Waters getting another victory, 45-13 over Central State for the Tigers, their second victory of the season. Virginia State keeping their slim hopes alive in the CIAA's Northern Division, defeated Elizabeth City State 34-12. Fayetteville State just gets it done. It's not pretty. They're not doing, the Broncos aren't playing necessarily well from an offensive standpoint, but they're playing much better defensively, right? Just win, baby. And that's what the Broncos did, 21-13 over Johnson C. Smith. Winston-Salem State gets its second straight victory, this time 41-14 over St. Augustine's. It was Shaw getting bouncing back with a 28-14 victory over Livingstone. West Virginia State gets a really big victory, keeps its slim hopes alive in the Mountain East Conference, 58-38 over Concord, who was one of the leaders in the MEC. Florida Memorial falling to Weber International 31-14. It was Texas College falling to Arizona Christian 81-19. Fort Valley State, again, keeping its slim hopes alive in the SIAC's Eastern Division, defeated Clark Atlanta 41-21. Virginia Union remains undefeated on the season, defeated Lincoln of Pennsylvania 45-20. In a close game, in an important game between Tuskegee and Lane, when you're talking about that SIAC's Western Division, Tuskegee prevails 35-31. That's 6 straight victories now for Tuskegee on the season, sets a big time showdown for Tuskegee against Kentucky State next week. Langston again continues to win, getting off. I think Langston lost, may have had a bye week a couple of weeks ago or last week, and then defeated Ottawa 44-38. So keeping retains a tie, at least for first place in the Sooner Athletic Conference. Lincoln of Missouri, tough season, losing to Nebraska Kearney 66-17. As mentioned, Kentucky State still on a roll, defeating Miles 35-7. If you're Kentucky State, big time game against Tuskegee on next week. It was Benedict remaining undefeated on the season, 35-0 over Morehouse. I believe one more victory for Benedict, they would win the SIAC's Eastern Division. And finally, Albany State keeping its slim hopes alive in terms of the SIAC Eastern Division, but even more so for an at-large or a berth. They're all at-large berths to the Division II playoffs, but a berth to the Division II playoffs, defeating Savannah State 31-20. Listen, I'm in a great mood. The shirt should tell you why. For those that can see, The shirt can tell you why. For those that are listening, got the Washington Commanders shirt on. So in a phenomenal mood today here on Manic Monday. A little bit later on our website, box2row.com, you can come back to see who the HBCU National Players of the Week are. Also, you can see the HBCU coaches and media polls on our website at box2row.com. Don't forget to tell a couple of friends about the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, where you can find us on our website at box2row.com, also on iHeartMedia.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch on the Box to Row YouTube page. Talk with you tomorrow.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. You can also listen to the podcast at box2row.com, iHeartMedia, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to get your HBCU football fix on Box to Row with Donal Ware each weekend on the radio station near you, and on SiriusXM on HBCU, Channel 142, and on ESPNU Radio on SiriusXM, Channel 84. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Box to Row for the latest in HBCU football, and don't forget to tell a friend.